Uh, Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks for joining us today on November's Ask Tom Database Security Office Hours. So my name is Richard Evans. I work for Russ, and I am an outbound product manager as well. So I talk about encryption at rest, encryption in motion, privilege control, auditing, monitoring, masking, database vault, anything under the security umbrella of database security, options or features is what our group covers. So today we're going to do another session on Database Vault because it is my favorite product, so I like talking about it. We're going to do kind of an advanced use case here today. So just a reminder that we are recording this call, and we're going to post these recordings on the Ask Tom page afterwards. So if you go to bit.ly/AskTomDBSec, you can click on all sessions and you can view those recordings. There's some good ones out there. We make reference to them quite often when we talk to customers or colleagues. We say, hey, go check out our session. I think we've got some good info there for you. All right, so if you haven't been here before, what is Ask Tom? Our Ask Tom is a direct channel into database security product management. It's a free and open forum where you can ask questions that you may not be able to get answered elsewhere. So each session, we're going to go over product announcements, maybe some technical content with the topic. We'll have a Q&A at the end that's not limited to just what we're talking about today. You can ask us other questions. If you ask us about a specific service request or something, we'll probably say, hey, I'm sorry, you're going to need to talk to the service manager about that. But and there's going to be a lot of things you might ask that I don't know. But the nice thing is we'll do this again in January, and you can communicate with us on email, and we can try to get you the right answer here. But we do 2 of these a day. They're exactly the same. So you don't need to attend both sessions. You can just attend this one. But yeah, so these are a fun opportunity for us. All right, some announcements here. Product release, we talked about this last time, but I want to bring it up again because we're really excited about Oracle Data Safe. So we've got an Ask Tom session out there from October. Oracle Data Safe is our cloud-based security solution that can help you with your autonomous databases or your DBCS instances. It can look at the security of the users, it can look at their privileges, it can look at audit data, it can identify sensitive data, and it can help mask that data. We have Database Security Assessment Tool 2.2, which was our released. We added a few things in here, including common privileges and roles, identifying those, some more improved remarks around the findings. We clarified some things there, and then Greek language pattern file for discovery too. So if you're discovering sensitive data in Greek language, you can do it now with DBSet. All right, so we are past October. And as everyone knows, Oracle releases our critical patch updates every quarter. So please take a look at the critical patch update. So a critical patch update is a collection of patches for multiple security vulnerabilities. These patches are usually cumulative, but each advisory describes only the security patches added since the previous CPU. So you should probably review it, take a look at it, make sure that it is cumulative. Like I said, it usually is, but sometimes there are exceptions. And for more information on it, go take a look at the MyOracle support note 2566015.1. You get the executive summary and some analysis on there. So please try to stay current on your patches. One of the things I talk to customers about, they always want to ask about 0-day vulnerabilities and this and that. You know, what happens is when any IT company patches software, when we release patches, when Cisco, when Microsoft, when IBM, that's when we start to see an increase in attacks on those CVEs, those common vulnerability and exploitation numbers, right? Because we're essentially releasing the information saying, hey, this is what we fixed, this is why we fixed it, this is why it's important. And that's when the attackers, the script kiddies, go after those vulnerabilities. So you see an uptake in exploitation attempts after a patch has been released. So that's why it's important to apply these patches in a timely fashion. All right. The other thing we're excited about is our Securing the Oracle Database ebook. This is the 3rd edition of this book. So we've got new chapters on data safe, updated content throughout. This is a free ebook that you can go download from oracle.com/securing the database. And the other thing we're excited about is Oracle University is going to release an advanced security administrator certificate in the next few weeks or a few months here. So this is going to be the premier certificate for Oracle Database Security practitioners. If you are an OCP, this is going to be a step up from that for security-minded or security-focused database administrators or OCPs. So I was fortunate to have the opportunity to help write this test, and I'll tell you, it's very difficult. It's appropriately difficult though, okay? So some of these topics include assessing typical attack points, right? We've talked about that with transparent data encryption, bypassing the database, what database vault protects, VPD, RAS, right? Some basic understanding of regulatory and CVEs as well as patching, deploying the maximum security architecture, whether it's transparent data encryption, RAS, VPD, just code-based access controls, roles, privileges, network security. I mean, you name it, it covers the gamut here. So it's not focused on any single product. It does touch on products that are licensable. It touches on a lot of features in the database though too, from privilege analysis to listener to security. I mean, it really is robust. So go check it out at education.oracle.com and look for 1Z0. That's a 0, not an O. -116 for the presentation slide. So it's really, I think it's going to be great. I'm excited for people to check it out and study for it and test on it, and then for us to get feedback on the exam. So, okay. With that housekeeping done, let's go ahead and jump into today's technical content here. All right, so to give you just kind of a level set on Database Vault. So Oracle Database Vault is a licensable option of the Oracle Enterprise Edition. It's built into the kernel of the database, so it doesn't require any additional software, agents, or hardware to manage. You would use Database Vault to protect application data from unauthorized access and to help organizations like yours comply with privacy and regulatory requirements. Okay, so at a high level, that's what Database Vault does. Database Vault provides kind of 2 different access controls. Okay, so we have what we call discretionary access control and mandatory access control. So your discretionary access control leaves proper usage of the user granted the privilege, leaves it up to them to decide what they want to do with it. So, for example, if I grant you select any table, then I expect you to use that privilege only for the access that you require, not to go poking around other tables, not to get curious, not to look at other things. If I grant select on HR.employees, then I'm allowing you to use that select anytime from anywhere, right? So, but maybe that's really too much, and I only want you to use it from the BI system, right? Or maybe during work hours, or maybe we have a batch cycle going that I don't want you to use this select or this select any table on, right? So Database Vault is a mandatory access control system, meaning even if you've been granted select any table, I can put restrictions on which tables you can use this privilege on, right? So, for example, maybe instead of you get select any table, maybe I apply something where I say where this table is in locations or departments, right? This is pseudocode. This isn't real code here. I'm just trying to explain what Database Vault could do for you, right? We want to make sure that you're only using it for these tables or where not in employees, right? Now, maybe on that batch job, we don't want you to access that HR table between 4 and 6 a.m. because that's when our batch jobs run. So we don't want you to access that HR table between 4 and 6 a.m. Maybe we want to do it differently, right? We can apply different rule sets to different commands. We can mix it up based on the user. So there's lots of things here we can do with Database Vault, okay? Today's topic, though, we're going to talk about Database Vault operations control in a multi-tenant environment. Ops control is a 19C Database Vault feature. So you've got to be on 19C of the database to take advantage of ops control. If you're licensed for Database Vault, ops control is included in that license. And what it does is it separates those container administrators, your C## users, your C## users, from PDB application data. Now we're going to use simulation mode for command rules, and I call it getting started the easy way, right? Because we want to protect the usage of commands. We're going to control it with a DB Vault rule set, but we don't want to start blocking yet. We want to start only in simulation mode so we don't affect the application. All right, so here's our exact scenario. We have 4 pluggable databases in a 19C CDB. We've got PDB1, CRM prod, HR prod, and fin prod. We have 2 container admins. We've got our security DBA Sal, and we've got our regular DBA Deborah. We want to prevent the container administrators from accessing application data in the pluggable databases, but we have 1 container user, Sal, who needs access to application data in the PDBs. And so maybe he's an auditor type user. He's a security auditor. And so he needs to verify compliance in each of the databases. It's easier to create him as a container admin and then give him access versus create him 4 times, 18 times, 32 times, however many PDBs we have. So we created him as a container admin, and we're going to give him access. But this one customer-facing database, or this database with customer data, CRM prod, is something we need to keep Sal out of some of these tables. All right, so he can't access everything. He can access data in the other environment. We're not that concerned about it, but maybe for regulatory compliance, we need to keep him out of the CRM prod database. And then, of course, we throw in a situation where we've got a problem with the FinProd database and we need to temporarily disable DVOps on it. All right, so first things we're going to do is verify that our container admins can see the data in each pluggable database. We're going to configure and enable Database Vault on the container and the CRM prod database. We're going to enable DVOps control in the container database, and there's no PDB restart for this. We'll verify that our 2 container admins cannot access application data. So, second, we're going to get interrupted, because we do, right? As we work, we're going to get interrupted with a problem with FinProd, and we're going to ask to troubleshoot it. So the team has asked that we temporarily disable DVOps control on this database. And just spoiler alert, right? It's not our problem that they found. It's going to be some other issue, but right, we're going to interrupt our work for them. We're going to demonstrate that we can temporarily disable DVOps on the FinProd to prove this out. Show that our container admins can help troubleshoot because we're team members. And then we're going to enable it when we realize that it was an app issue the whole time. All right. And then what we're going to do is add our SEC analyst, Sal, our SEC DBA Sal, as an exception to Database Vault Ops Control. So he can query the data, but we're going to go and protect our CRM prod with command rules. Okay. We're going to start in simulation mode because we want to make sure that we know who uses the app and we don't want to affect anything yet. And then migrate from simulation to enabled when we're comfortable. And we can do the same thing with a create command rule on connect. Okay. All right, let's get to it. Let me show you my environment here. I'm going to do a live demonstration. So hopefully the demo gods are awake and helpful for me this morning. One of the things, we're going to have a kind of an extended period in here, 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, where we're enabling the security of this, or enabling, configuring and enabling database vault. So we can kind of take questions or talk about it there. But one of the things I want to show you first is I'm super excited. And anybody who will listen, I talk about what I've got here. I'm using Tim Hall's Vagrant scripts to build out my environment. And he's got great scripts out there on this. So I'm going to plug Tim Hall here for a second. And I've got the ability to spin up a data guard, primary, and a standby, basically just by typing Vagrant up in here. So I'm not going to type the up because it's already up, but I'll show you what I can do with Vagrant. And Vagrant and VirtualBox together are a fantastic combination that Tim's put together with these scripts. So the scripts will spin up a VirtualBox instance of a certain size that's labeled in the parameter file. And then we can use Vagrant to connect to it and to manage it. So let's see if we VI our Vagrant file here real quick. You know, you can see that it goes after this YAML file and gets all the information about the VM sizes and spins it up, you know, forwards ports to this environment too. So you can connect from your local host to here. So it really is so powerful. I use it a lot with like snapshots. So let me clear my screen so you can scroll up a little bit here. Let me see. You can use snapshots here and you can list them, delete them, restore them. You can do lots of things with it here. So it's a quick and easy way. And once you follow Tim's steps, you can quickly build out any node really quick. So like I've got, let's see, what have I got? I have multiple versions of multiple databases running on here because of his scripts. So real fantastic stuff that you can take advantage of. So look at Tim Hall's Vagrant scripts for your testing, okay? All right, so let's get started on this. We use Vagrant SSH to connect to it, and then we connect his Oracle. So all this stuff gets configured. I've got I've got a bunch of scripts in here. I copied it to the wrong directory, I guess. All right, so let's see, November 14th. Yeah, that's right now. All right, so the first thing I want to do is kind of connect to my database and see what the status of database vault is. So I've got a bunch of scripts here that I'm going to go ahead and just show you what they look like, talk through them, and then we'll execute it. And I can publish all these scripts for you if you want to take a look at this. It's a little bit custom to my environment, but there's certainly some good information in here you can reuse. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a select star from DBA DV status to take a look at what the container thinks, or what the status is for database vaults in the container. And then I wrote a little query here to combine $VDollar PDBs and the CDB DV status view, so I can see what the status is in each of the pluggable databases. All right, let's run this guy and see what we get here. So I tried to make it look a little nicer, but I'm gonna have to scroll a little bit. All right, so when you're looking for ops control in the parameter, it's called DV app protection. So you'll hear me refer to it as app protection sometimes and ops control other times. So the variable is actually called DV app protection. You can see that it's not configured. Database vault is not configured. Database vault is not enabled. And if it's not enabled or configured in the container, then we can't use it in the pluggables yet. So here's our CRM prod. All these databases are open read write, our fin prod, HR prod, PDB1. And here you can see we've got all of the same variables and the exact same status as our container. All right, so first thing we want to do is just use Sal and verify that he can see the data. So I'll just show you what my query looks like here. I'm connecting as Sal to the HR prod database, the fin prod database, the CRM. I could have done an alter session, set container equal to these databases, but I connected using TNS. And then I show you what who the user is, the con name, and then the select account from HR employees. Now I know this is redundant here, right? We've got the same schema in each database. So you're like, well, wait, Rich, you said this was a CRM database and a financial database. Why do you have HR.employees in each of them? Because it's easier, frankly, and it's something that you guys could use. I didn't want to create a bunch of separate objects that you had to install. You can load the HR schemas, and then you could clone the database real easily, and then you could kind of perform something similar to what I'm doing here. So I try to keep it very generic, very high level. I'm showing you the concept of what we can do here, right? All right, so let's go ahead and run this. Let me clear this screen. And then we run this guy here. Let's see what Saul sees. All right, our sec DBA Saul and the HR database sees 107. Then prod sees 107. CRM sees 107 rows in the HR.employees table. So he can see the data. Let's do the same thing with DBA Deborah. Let me clear the screen again, and we'll take a look at DBA Deborah. Same thing, we connected her to each of the databases. Exact same SQL. All I did was swap out the DBA Deborah portion, or the Sal for DBA Deborah. Let's run that and see what we get. All right, same thing, right? Connecting to the databases, DBA Deborah, real easy, straightforward stuff. Okay, so now let's get started with what we have for Database Vault. We're gonna VI this script called Oracle Configure DV. And one of the cool things about this script is I can incorporate this script into the build of my Vagrant database. So it actually calls this script, and if I want to spin up a new database, it can enable Database Vault for me. It can enable transparent data encryption. So if I want to test something and I wanted a fully loaded environment with TDE and Database Vault, I can do a Vagrant up after I've written these scripts, and it uses these scripts and it builds that environment, and then I can take snapshots of it. So real cool. So I create my users. I'm creating them as container admins. So my Database Vault owner and my Database Vault account manager are both container equal all users. That may work for your organization. Maybe you want to do it, have a pluggable database user manage each of those. And then remember, we've got backup users. Please, please, please remember to create your DV owner backup. And more important, well, equally important, is giving them the right privileges. Remember to give them the privileges you need, okay? So in our container, we configure it, and then we execute enable, and then remember, we need to grant DV owner to our backup user, and then we need to grant account manager to our backup account manager user. And do that for container equal all if you're using container admins. Now we're gonna bounce the database. We're gonna do the configuration as well here on our pluggable database CRM prod. So we do the same thing here, and then we enable it, and then we have to restart the database as well, okay? So we'll close them, open them, and take a look at the status of them. So let's run this script, and again, this will take 3 or 4 minutes to run. So let's see. Let me open another window here and connect. We can take a look at that script again while it's running. I need to connect this way. I get SQL Developer working here too. But, so yeah, you can see, try to be a little bit verbose about where we're at in the process so we can see what the status of these things are as we go through. If you have any questions or anything so far, feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the group chat. One of the things while that's going, I want to show you over here is, I'm going to move this to my shared screen here, is using SQL Developer, and I've got all these Vagrant localhost connections. So what I do is I use SSH to connect to my server here, my internal server, and I give it a port for my SSH, and then I use a tunnel here. So I connect to, so my connections are actually proxying on the local host and connecting to this port 1529 on my .150 address here, okay? So when I connect to my Vagrant instance here, and I'm doing this because I'm going to a remote box, then to a Vagrant instance, but what I do here is that way when I make my connections, it says localhost for the host name, the port 1521, and then the pluggable database. So I can connect to it from here. So SSH tunneling is something I use almost every day when I'm trying to connect to one of my instances or an OCI instance. We use that quite a bit in OCI as well, okay? All right, so success, our database opened. We've got database vault enabled and configured on the container database. Our CRM prod, we've got database vault not enabled there, so we work on it, we bounce it, and then we've got it enabled and configured here, configured and enabled. And so there, we can see it there. Okay, cool. So now that we've got it enabled and configured, let's take a look at the status again. So we'll run our status script here again. Now our status says, so we still don't have ops control enabled. We do have database vault configured in the container and enabled in the container. Then that allows us to decide what to do in each of the pluggable databases. So then we've got it enabled in CRM prod. We've got it not enabled in FinProd, HR prod, or PDB1. So, you know, this could be a situation where you're consolidating databases, maybe on Exadata or DBCS, right? And you're working to build out your secure infrastructure, your maximum security architecture. So you have a patch window, maybe from that October patch, and you want to get database vaults enabled and configured, but the majority of your apps today or your databases, you just haven't had time to really dig in and get database vault working with them. So you can leave it disabled for 3/4 of your databases here and just enable it on the database that you are comfortable starting with, okay? So you can use database vault in this mixed mode, all right? All right, so we did that. Let's take a look at this next query and let's see what I got here. All right, the first thing we're gonna do is enable ops control. Ops control is enabled by the DB owner using this dbms macadam.enable app protection. Again, no reboot required. So let's just go ahead and do it here. So let's enable ops control, successfully enabled. Now let's run that same query we just ran where we take a look at the DB status. All right. Run this guy. Our container now says DB app protection went from disabled to enabled, and every one of our pluggable databases now shows it as enabled. CRM, FinProd, HR prod, PDB1. But notice that we don't have database vault enabled on FinProd, HR prod, or PDB1, right? Database vault is not configured, not enabled. But that's the cool thing about ops control is we can enforce that. We can enable that protection from container administrators on each of our pluggable databases, whether or not we've configured and enabled database vault on that pluggable database. Okay, so it extends that control. So like I said, if you're in the process of adding these layers of security to your infrastructure, then you can get started with database vault in the container, maybe 1 or 2 pluggable databases, but you can enable that ops control for all pluggable databases. All right, so now let's just double check. All right, so let's use deb, right? So we had our deb query. Let's see, where's deb at? Query with deb. Sounds like a show. Oop, yep, now we're getting insufficient privileges when deb tries to query the HR user data, the financial data information, all the databases. Deb is getting blocked here, okay? All right, so this is that situation where we we have an issue with our FinProd database. Remember, we've got our financial database. We just got done enabling ops control, and they're saying, hey, there's a problem with the FinProd. We think it's ops control. You're like, no, it's not ops control, man. That's not a thing. It's not an issue. Yeah, but we want to disable it to do some testing. We need to just make sure we can rule it out, right? Okay, that's fine. We'll do that. No PDB restart required. No CDB restart required here. Again, we're just going to disable app protection and then provide our database name in here. Okay, so we connect as a DB owner. We do that, and then we can show them like, all right, fine. Let's do our testing. Let's work on it. And then you'll quickly realize that it's not an issue with us. It's an application issue, right? So I queried just the FinProd database to show that it's disabled in the FinProd. We didn't have database vault configured or enabled for it, so now we can query those users. We could do the query with DBA Deborah, so let me clear this screen so we can see it at the top here. So like, let's say we just run our query with Deb again. So notice she still can't access the HR prod data. She can access the FinProd because we disabled ops control on that one for now. She can't access on CRM prod, okay? And if we took a look at what that looked like, we queried our status as a whole here. I'm gonna clear the screen again. And then if we just query DB status, that one. All right, so then again, what you see is enabled true in the container database. CRM is protected. FinProd is disabled. HR prod is enabled. PDB1 is enabled. And I haven't been querying PDB1. It was a default database that was there when we created it. I figured querying 3 of these was enough. All right, so let's go back and we're going to enable ops control now. So crisis averted. Everything is right with the world again. Wasn't the database admin's fault, right? I'm a recovering database administrator, so I have worked with developers. I love developers. I love talking about security features, but I also like to poke fun at them. All right, so let's go ahead and enable it. We'll query it again to show that ops control is re-enabled, right? So we'll just query it as security analyst Sal and connect to the database and check it out here. So let me clear the screen. So we're back up toward the top. And then we'll run our query, right? Denied once again. So real easy to flip back and forth. We don't anticipate, hopefully, you needing to disable ops control that often. But that is one of the nice things about it, is that you can enable it and disable it without an outage window, okay? All right, so now we've got our scenario where we've got our user Sal, who does need to query data in each of the databases, right? Remember, he's a security analyst, he's a auditor, he's whatever he is, and it was easier to create him in the container database versus creating named accounts in each one of these pluggable databases. Maybe we have 200 of them and we didn't want to create 200 different users for Saul. So we created him as a container admin. And we know that he's going to need to access those PDBs. So we can use this add app exception here. And the second percentage is if we want him to go after like a particular package here. So we could do that. We could say you can only execute this package. We're going to open him wide up here so he can connect to any of the pluggable databases. All right, so let me clear this screen. So we query it before and after just to demonstrate that he wasn't there before and then he is there afterwards. All right, let's run this query. All right, so no rows selected before. We execute the PL SQL, and now we can see that we've got our sec DBA Sal in there as somebody on the exception list. We'll clear this again. Now let's go back up and we'll take a look at our query with Sal again, and I'll show it to you just one more time here so you can see it. But again, right, we're just going to each of the container database or each of the pluggable databases, running our select on it and working through it here. So again, I'm going to clear the window, execute our query. Now you can see Sal sees everything, right? Sal gets that 107 back from all of our databases. What about Debbie? What happens when we execute Debbie here? Debbie gets insufficient privileges, right? She was not an exception to ops control, just Sal. So Sal sees 107, 107, 107. Poor Debbie gets insufficient privileges, 1031, 1031, 1031. So that's good. That's what we want, right? We don't want her seeing any of that, okay? All right. So we've exempted Sal from our database ops protection, ops control. And now remember, in our scenario though, Sal can't go into the CRM database and query a particular table. So now we're gonna go from ops control to database vault, realms, command rules, rule sets, rules, and we're gonna use a command rule to protect this database. Okay, so like let's view my script here to protect CRM with a command rule. So the first thing we're going to do is just show that there's no rows in our DBA DB simulation log view. Okay. We could use realms here to protect all objects. I use a command rule. I like command rules. I think they're more granular. They give you, more exact control here over what you want. If you want to protect everything in that bucket or in the employees, everything against that employees table or everything in the HR schema, whether it's select, insert, update, delete, truncate, alter table, right, everything, realms are easy to get started with. But if you need more fine-grained control there, I like to use a command rule on select, a command rule on insert, update, delete, things like that. So we can be more specific with what we're looking for here. So here's what we do is we create a command rule. So we're logged in as a DB owner user into the CRM prod database. We are going to create a command rule on select. We're going to use an out-of-the-box rule called disabled. I just went with this so we can test with it. So basically everybody is going to show up in the simulation log, and that's what we want, right? We just want to capture everybody to start with. We're not blocking, right? Because we set our enabled status to simulation mode instead. So if it said G_yes, we'd be blocking. It says G_simulation, and that way we're just blocking this, okay? And we're only going to apply this to our one table here. So we get started kind of the easy way, right? Let's find out who's using this table and then work from there. All right, so we don't have any rows in our log. That's what we expected. And we enabled our command rule. Now let's go through and just kind of query this with each of our users, okay? We've got our query with Deb. Okay, she's denied. All right, so wait a second, but you told me you just did it in simulation mode. So why would she be denied? Well, remember, she's denied because she's not exempted from ops control. She's being denied by ops control, not by database vault command rules or rule sets or realms here. She's denied because ops control is enforced and she is not on our exempt list like Sal. All right, well, let's see what happens with Sal. Paste our Sal query in here, query with Sal. Sal can see the data in HR prod, fin prod, CRM prod. He can see data everywhere. This darn CRM prod is what we're concerned about, right? We need to protect it. Now let's just query it with the HR app. I haven't shown you this query yet, but as you can guess, it's exactly the same as the others, just with a change in username. So we'll connect to HR as each of the pluggable databases and execute the same query. So same thing, just copy that script, changed Sal to HR or Debbie to HR, and we do the same thing. All right. Okay, so HR is a is a pluggable user in each of these databases. So HR can see the data in each of the environments. Now remember, my scenario is, a little generic here. I just used the sample data for each of these pluggable databases. So the HR data in HR prod makes sense. The HR data in FinProd doesn't make sense, and the HR data in CRM prod doesn't really make sense. But I didn't want to create other objects that you would have to work on. I wanted you to be able to use some of the sample data here and try this out in your environment. So you'll see the same query and the same generic information here. But think if he was Fin instead of HR or CRM admin instead of HR. But because he's a PDB user in each of these, he can query that data. So it's not the same user. It's not a container user. He's a distinct user in each of these pluggable databases. All right, so he can query the data. All right, I'm gonna clear this screen, and then we're gonna view this simulation log data, okay? So basically, that query that I did before I executed my create command rule. So let's go ahead and run it. All right, so we have 2 command rule violations here, and I limited what I pulled back from this table or this view. There's a trick to this view that's, there's a nested table in here for a couple of the columns. I think we've got the documentation updated to show you how to work with those nested columns. But if you do run into queries where you have an issue, there's a couple data types that you have to work through here. But so I just went after these particular columns here because this is what's important to me. We can see we've got command rule violation. We can see the user. We can see what machine he came from, what command he executed, what module he was using. So I'm using SQL+. And then we can see here that what the exact statement that Sal executed as well as HR. So if we had been enforcing the command rule, then this would have been blocked, and we would have blocked Sal, and we would have blocked HR from doing this, okay? So as we do this, we go through, right, we would refine we would look at this information and we would start to build our command rules, rules and rule sets based on this information. So, okay, we know we want to lock Sal out, but wait a second, we know we need HR in there. Okay, so we need to exempt HR, so we'll create a rule for HR. And then we think, well, okay, well, maybe we need to make sure that HR only comes from a certain machine using a certain module. So we could probably do that, right? Realistically, HR is not probably going to use SQL+. He's going to use a JDBC thin client. So we'll create a rule set that kind of protects there. So the simulation mode kind of allows us to get started here and, work on what we want to do and how we want to protect it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and let's say we've collected as much data as we need. We've got where our HR user comes from. We want to purge the simulation log and maybe do this again and again and kind of refine this, right? So a period of time has gone by and we're comfortable with what we have for our rules. So let's take a look here. So we decided, for simplicity's sake, that the CRM prod database, we're going to create a rule for database vault that's going to allow HR access when you're HR. So if your session user is HR, cool, you meet that rule. We're going to create a rule set that allows a limited select access. And then we're going to write back, and if somebody violates this rule set, then it's going to give them a failed message, a custom message that says only HR can use select. We add that rule, allow HR access, to our rule set. And then we update our command rule. So remember here, the rule set name was disabled, was equal to disabled. And now the rule set name is being changed to RS, allow HR access. So again, we're just in simulation mode. So we've refined our rules a little bit further. So we want to go ahead and implement that. And then let's run our queries again, right? So time has gone by. We're implementing a little bit more in our rule set because we want to get some of those users like HR that we know should access the data out of there and that violation logs, so we can make it easier to kind of refine and see what's going on, okay? We query it with DBA Deb. Now, again, remember, DBA Deb has not been exempted from ops control, so she can't see the data. Let's query it with Sal. Sal has been exempted from ops control, so he can see the data. And again, we're only in simulation mode, so he sees the data. Let's query it with HR. HR can see the data as expected. HR is a distinct user in each of these pluggable databases, so he can see his own data in each of the PDBs. Now let's take a look at the simulation log again and see what we see now, okay? All right, we see we've got this Sol user here. We've got Sol twice. We've got HR twice. Did I not run my purge logs? I don't think I did. Let's do this again. I missed a step in my script here. All right, let's delete 3 rows. Yeah, I don't remember seeing that. Let's delete 3 rows. We'll run this again. We'll run this again. And we'll run HR again. All right, so I purged the log because I don't want to see anything from the previous rule set. I want to see new stuff. All right, there we go. So now instead of seeing HR in there, because remember, we added HR as an acceptable user to query this data, to use the select on the HR.employees table. And now our rule violations are less, right? We're only seeing 1 here. We still see that security analyst Sol, security DBA Sol, using SQL Plus to query this data. Okay, so now that we know we're not seeing any violations from our application user connecting, right? Because we want to make sure our application user connects, that we don't have any outages, we don't have anything that's going to affect it. We're now comfortable, and we're going to implement this in blocking mode, right? Enabled mode. So again, connect as a DB owner. I change the update command rule from G simulation to G_yes. So he is enabled now, and he is in blocking mode as soon as I run this. All right, let's do our queries again. We've got our DBA Deb. Insufficient privileges, but again, remember, that comes from ops control, not from our rules. Let's do Sal. Let's do Sal. Okay, now remember, Sal is exempt, so Sal can query the HR prod, the fin prod, but when Sal gets to our CRM prod, he gets that custom error message that we created for him. Only HR can use select. So we've accomplished what we want to accomplish with 2 tools here, but just to verify, let's go ahead and query with HR too to make sure that HR is okay. Yep, HR is good. The HR user in HR prod can query, the one in fin prod can query, and then the one in CRM prod can access the data. Okay, so again, we're taking this slowly, right? We want to enable ops control on the container. We want to enable database vault on the pluggable databases, the PDBs that we can, and we want to step through this. So we can use simulation mode with this here to identify those violations that would happen if this rule set, or if this command rule, or if this realm was in place, okay? All right, let's purge this simulation log so we're not confused maybe later when we look at this. Delete that 1 row. All right, so now that we're protecting that application, what about protecting where HR connects from, right? So if you're starting to protect the application data from queries from the DBAs or curious users, those users with select any table, those users with select on the specific table, right? So again, remember, we could have used our rule set to narrow down that time of day when Sal could have done that query, right? That could be something we add there. So we don't want him to query that table during batch operations. So we could do that. But what I'd really encourage you guys to do is look at using this cool I love how we've created this here as a procedure, create connect command rule, where we want to protect who or how we use the HR user. So each connect can have statement can have its own command rule associated with it. So we can have one for HR, one for Fin, one for CRM, one for whoever, right? And here we're going to set it to disabled, because the thing is, stolen credentials is what gets you. All right. Somebody uses, misuses, abuses, or is just lazy, right? And he uses this HR user to log directly into the database. And we don't want that, right? We want them using their named account to log in. Okay. So let's go ahead and put this guy in place. All right. And then let's just run, a query with HR again. And then let's query that particular log. So here we can see we've got a violation of the simulation mode. What was violated with a command rule of somebody connecting as HR, and we can see where they connected from and what they did here. So let's do another one here. I'm going to connect as my user here. Oh, wrong database. You got to use the right database. I don't have him listed here. Let's create him real quick. CRM prod. Yeah. Test it. Save it. Connect. All right. It's connected to CRM prod. I overrode my existing one. Yeah, but that's okay. Select from. Employees. Okay, we can see data there. All right, now let's query our simulation log again here. All right, so here you can see that we've got many more violations here of people from a laptop logging in as HR, using SQL Developer, logging in from a laptop, using SQL Developer, logging in from a laptop. Man, we don't want them using the HR user, right? So we didn't stop them from doing it. We're just starting to identify who's doing it and start to kind of lock down, right? We're adding that security controls here, okay? Again, check it out. I can share these scripts with you if you want them. Just to kind of summarize here, we've got ops control enabled in a container database as well as database vault. So we have to have database vault configured and enabled in the container. We've got ops control enabled on all of our pluggable databases. We only have database vault enabled on CRM prod. So we haven't got to these other production databases yet, but we'll get there. And then we want to see who's exempt or who has an exception to connect to each database. So we've got our C ## sec DBA Sal who can query these databases, but we protected his query with database vault command rules. All right, I think that's what my slide says as a summary, and I think I just did it for you, okay? All right, let's go to the next slide here. Summary, right? Separate container admins from PDB application data. Can be enabled on PDBs that don't have DV Vault configured or enabled. And that really cool thing is you can enable or disable it without CDB or PDB restart. You can create temporary exemptions for users or PDBs when necessary, which we did, right? We had that situation with our FinProd database. We've got our container user, Sal, who needed access to all databases. And then in 12.2, you can use simulation mode to just ensure your command rules or realms do not break applications they're protecting, okay? All right, so thanks everybody. We are gonna be tied up in December, so we won't have an Ask Tom in December. The next one will be January 9th, I believe, of 2020. So, wow, 2020. Tentatively talking about transparent data encryption, some advanced use cases there. Some of the cool things that you can do with Vagrant is that ability to spin up a quick database, test TDE on it, test it with Rack, test it with DataGuard. There's lots of neat things that you can do with those combinations there. So I may try to get Peter Wall to talk about it, or I may just try to get Peter to do a brain dump for me, and we'll talk about, transparent data encryption in a rack environment, in a data guard environment, with key management, maybe some of the nuances with encrypt credentials that you can do, some things like that. So yeah, we'll do something there. All right. You have any questions here? We're going to go ahead and see who stuck with me. We'll take some questions now. If you have any questions about the topic, that's great. If you don't, we can talk about other things too here. We've got about 3 minutes left. If you want to type your questions in the chat, you can. If you want to unmute yourself, you're welcome to unmute yourself. If you come across in chat here, and then you feel free to unmute yourself if you want. You can do that. All right, will DataSafe be available for on-prem use? Yes, I can't give you a date because I don't know a date, but that is the goal, is that it will be available. It will be a while. Is DataSafe available for regular EE, high performance, extreme? DataSafe is available for your databases that are DBCS, so any of those, yes, or your autonomous databases, okay? So it's available to those two classes of database. There's some things around the account status like flex spending, payment accounts, something like that. But yes, there is an update to, there is the ability to use DataSafe with your high performance or extreme performance databases, okay? Yep, Tim scripts are awesome. I agree. 2-node rack, fully installed, patched, and customized in less than 2 hours. Yeah, I agree, Peter. It's really cool. I'd kind of like to do a session just on it. Maybe we could get Tim to do it sometime. But all right. So Jim says, is there an upgrade coming for Flash, and will it remove AutoVault, and will it remove Flash? Yes. Yeah, there is an upgrade coming. We're working on AutoVault 19. And I believe that release will remove Flash. If not, it will be removed at some point because we recognize that Flash is being de-supported by most of the browsers and kind of phased out. So yes, sir, there will be